Hello, my name is Matt White with Push Industries. Today we're going to be going through the adjustments of both the Gen 1 and Gen 2 9.1 and how to dial them into your ride. We found riders have a wider preference of settings on the front fork as opposed to the rear shock, and we found that is due to geometry, cockpit setup, and riding preferences. But the 9.1 has the adjustment range to fit any riding style. First, we're going to run through all the adjustments on the 9.1, and then later we'll talk about how they affect the ride. First, we're going to talk about the left side, which houses the coil spring. This is an adjustment based on your rider weight. Also on the left side, at the bottom, you have your bottom out control. On Gen 1 forks, this is an air bottom out system that's set between 10 and 50 psi. On Gen 2 forks, this is a hydraulic bottom out system that is set between 20 and 40 psi. Then moving up the left side, on Gen 1 forks, we have a blank cap. But on Gen 2 forks, we have a new feature called the subchamber. We will talk more about the subchamber in future videos. But for now, the subchamber just has two settings, and that's open, closed. Closed being fully clockwise, and open being fully counterclockwise. Moving over to the right side, we have the damper with compression on top, low speed being the blue dial, clockwise is firmer, counterclockwise is softer. Similar with the black high-speed dial, clockwise firmer, counterclockwise softer. Moving down to the bottom, you have the red rebound dial. On the rebound dial, clockwise is slower, counterclockwise is faster. With all the damper settings, we count clicks from closed or fully clockwise. This gives you the most consistent comparison between forks and setups. And lastly, on the back of the fork, we have the air bleeders. These aren't really an adjustment, but actually a tool to help you get a consistent fork all the time. Dialing in a fork may seem like a daunting task, but hopefully with a few simple tips, we can make it easier. A lot of times riders can get overwhelmed with suspension settings, and that's just due to all the adjustments and the overlap they have between them. For example, if a fork feels harsh, it could be a spring that is either too soft or too stiff, compression settings that are too firm or too soft, or rebound that is too slow. So in order to get a better understanding of what each adjustments do, let's run through them and how they affect the ride quality. The first setting would be getting the right spring rate. The spring controls your ride height and bottoming control, and is crucial for setting up the suspension correctly. Getting on the right spring rate is based on your rider weight, and we'll go over that in more detail later. After the spring setting, we have the compression damper settings. The compression damping settings are used to balance bump sensitivity and support. A counterclockwise or a softer dial position can increase bump sensitivity, but also decrease support, while a firmer or clockwise position can increase support, but might decrease bump sensitivity. To define those terms more, with increased bump sensitivity, it can improve traction and comfort. When we talk about support, it's the ability of the damper to maintain ride height over different terrain and braking features. Compression adjustments are great for varying trail conditions. A fast, firm, or flowy trail might require more support, and thus a firmer compression setting. A slower or a more technical or a wet trail might require a softer compression setting to increase grip and traction. Now we move down to the rebound dial, which is ideal for balancing traction and comfort. A faster or a more counterclockwise dial setting will increase comfort, but could also reduce traction. Conversely, a slower or a clockwise dial setting can increase grip, but it might decrease some comfort. The ideal rebound setting is based on your spring rate and compression settings, so making big swings to compression settings can require changes to your rebound. So now that we know the basics of the settings, we can see how they interact with your 9.1 and how to get the most out of it. The first step in the proper setup of 9.1 is to ensure you're on the correct spring rate. To get on the correct spring rate, you need to know your accurate rider weight. Your rider weight is you with all your riding gear. That includes helmets, shoes, packs, water, anything else you might take with you on the trail. Oftentimes riders will just estimate their rider weight, or they base it off stepping on a scale years ago. This can present problems later on, and it's best to start off with as accurate of a rider weight as possible. If you bought the fork new, the spring was pre-selected to your rider weight. If you bought the fork used, you might need to check the spring and reference the spring rate guide on the Push Industries website. Measuring sag can be a useful reference, but it's not actually a tool we typically use to ensure we're on the right spring rate. It's best to use the spring rate guides on the website. The final adjustment to the spring would be the 2 preload spacers we include with the fork. These go between the spring and the bottom out control cap. These are great for fine-tuning the spring rate if you're already within the weight range on the guide. Next is the bottom out control unit, and this will help increase or decrease bottom out support. If you feel like you need more support, you can add air to either system via a standard shock pump. If you feel like you're hitting too much of a wall force near the end of stroke, you can decrease the air pressure to reduce the bottom out resistance. Please keep in mind, if you're not using full travel, it doesn't mean your settings are wrong. We place more emphasis on ride quality than the measured settings. To wrap up the spring side, on Gen 2 forks, we have the subchamber. The subchamber is a great tool for making quick changes to the overall spring rate. Open or counterclockwise has no effect on the suspension, while clockwise or closed increases the effective spring rate. Being able to quickly increase the spring rate is great for situations where more support is needed, such as racing or carrying a heavy pack on long rides. Next, we can talk about compression settings and how to effectively use low and high speed compression. Low speed compression is the primary tool we use to balance small bump sensitivity and support. A softer or more open low speed position will increase small bump sensitivity. A firmer or more closed position will increase support. The high speed dial is good for medium and large bump sensitivity, but actually we mostly use it for supporting and assisting the low speed setting. And what we mean by that is sometimes trail conditions require softer low speed compression setting for increased traction, but also require some support for other sections. In those situations, we would run the low speed compression more open to increase small bump sensitivity and traction, while closing the high speed to increase support in the larger hits. This might give up a little bit of comfort in some of the larger hits, but suspension is always going to be a compromise. On all 9.1s leaving the factory, we set the high speed and low speed compression at 15 out from closed. Out on the trail, it's best to start with the low speed compression and bracket it 3 to 5 clicks in either direction to see how that affects the ride. With a good low speed setting, you can move on to your high speed setting and see how it interacts with your low speed setting. Lastly, we set the rebound setting, and this is because it's dependent on the spring rate and compression settings. Your compression settings are a great balance of support and sensitivity, but if you're looking for more grip or more comfort, that's when you need to make changes to your rebound. As with compression damping, it's best to bracket the rebound 1 to 3 clicks in either direction to get a good sense of how it changes the ride feel. And of course, suspension tuning is iterative. As you adjust rebound, you might need to come back and adjust your compression, which you might need to come back and adjust your rebound. Which is why it's always helpful to track and note your settings. If you need to come back to an old setup, you know exactly which dials to turn. Just a couple notes before we wrap up. On the compression settings, if you are fully open or fully closed, that might be a sign that you're on the incorrect spring rate or there might be an issue with your fork. However, on the rebound, the full adjustment range is a usable range. If you're near the end of either side, there is no issues there. Finally, to wrap up, the fork leaves the factory ready to ride. With the settings in the middle, you're ready to go and safe to ride. If you feel like you have any questions or need help with your setup, feel free to reach out to Push customer service via phone, chat, or email.